end. She's going to try and record it from down there. So,
All right.
Sorry. Right. Technical problems over, hopefully. Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's episode of the Expat Chat podcast. Now, we're doing this by live blab, and we have two special guests with us. Today's topic of conversation, I'm going to have to scroll to the top of the screen just to find it, but basically it's about how to travel on less than US$70 per day, and we've got the people who can prove the very point. With us is Brendan Lee from Bren on the Road, and also Duncan and Jane Dempster Smith from To Travel To. So, hi, guys. How are you?
Yeah, thank you.
Good to have you along. Before we start, though, both you guys have been podcast episodes in the past, and some of our viewers today may well have heard that. But I'll get you to give a brief recap of your travel history, what got you started, and how long you've been travelling for. Brendan, do you want to start with your story? You're a former accountant, aren't you?
Yeah, sure. So I studied at university in New Zealand, in Auckland. I became an accountant when I was 20. Got my qualifications, and then after about 3.5 years, I paid off my student debt. I was just looking for something new to do, I guess. So I took my first trip overseas to Tanzania. Came home. The next trip was to South America. Came back home, and then it just kind of kept going. I moved to China for a year. I traveled Asia, traveled to Europe. Went back to South America and Africa a few times, and just kept going. And during that time, I sort of started my own online career, I suppose, in freelancing and blogging. And it's been about 5 years now, so this is where we are.
It's your new way of life, and we'll talk more in more detail soon, because your position or your situation is quite interesting, because obviously as a student you had debt to clear before you hit the road, which is something I think a lot of our listeners would relate to. So we'll talk more in more detail about that shortly. Duncan and Jane, do you want to give us your story? Obviously you're at the other end of the age scale, if you don't mind me pointing that out to you both. What was your situation? What got you travelling, and how long have you been going for?
Well, I think when we started, it was really our eldest son, Robert, who actually, kind of like Brendan, had taken a late gap year. And what was happening was that we were on Facebook, and we were kind of stalking him and watching and looking at all the amazing photographs. And when he got to Machu Picchu, we kind of looked at each other and went, wow, we'd love to do that. We'd love to go to Patagonia. We'd love to go to Mexico. We'd love to go to Croatia sailing, all of that fun stuff. And we kind of realised that, why couldn't we? What was stopping us from doing that? And at that stage, we had more like equity on our side. And Brendan, that being an accountant, we didn't have the debt side, but we had equity. And then we were thinking, well, are we just going to continue to build up equity, or are we going to actually release that and actually give ourselves time? So that's what we've done. We've released the equity, we've given ourselves back on the general ledger of life time. So that's what we've done.
So you guys have been on the road for how long now?
Well, it's coming up for 3 years, really, so not quite as impressive as Brendan in terms of the 5 years. But we're about to go into our third year. We head off again at the end of May, and we head off to Europe, where we're going to base ourselves in Barcelona. I know it's a hard gig. And then for my 60th, this is my 60th year, I'm going to celebrate that in Cuba this year.
Excellent. Well, it's great having you both on board, and the interesting thing is you've both been doing this for a number of years. So we're not talking about a one-off bit of good fortune. You've both managed to travel and keep your costs below that threshold. Obviously, for you guys, Duncan and Jane, you're traveling as a couple, and you've set yourself the goal, which we'll talk in more detail about, of basically traveling for the equivalent of the Australian pension, which is 92, I think, Australian dollars per day, or 63 US, and that's been a target you've been hitting. We'll talk about that a bit more. So I think there's a lot of baby boomers who will be very interested in how you've managed to do that. Brendan, obviously from your point of view, you travel for considerably less than that, because you travel on your own. What sort of average cost per day or per month would you say you travel at?
It depends so much on where you go. The location that you decide to travel at is pretty much the main determinant of how much you're going to spend, I feel. But at the lower end of the scale, it can be as low as $15 to $20 a day. At the higher end, it could be up to $70 or $80 a day. But it just depends on where you are and how you feel at that time as well. But there's always a way to keep the cost at $70 to $80. It's for me, it feels very hard to surpass that unless you're trying to do it.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think it's important to emphasise at this point that both you guys, or the stories of both of you, is obviously your own unique situation, and everybody is different. Everybody wants to travel what it feels good to them. For some people, it may be that your goal isn't to travel for that sort of level of money, and that's fine too. But for others who are thinking that travel is expensive, I think you're both great proof of the fact that it's not. And also to emphasise, I mean, as you say, Duncan and Jane, you're not crimping and saving there. You're not in hostels for that sort of money. So if you're thinking, well, I'm going to have to be living off the smell of an oily rag and sharing a room with a bunch of 10, 18-year-olds sort of thing, it's not necessarily the case to achieve that sort of budget. But I think before we really get into it, I want to talk about that point, because I think, to me, that's one of the biggest misunderstandings for most people, isn't it? That we are basically trained to believe that travel is expensive because marketing tells us that. And all you ever see on television is marketing companies who have products to sell teaching you that travel is expensive. But it's not really, guys, is it?
No, it's not. Yeah, we started off the first year with a massive budget. We look back at it now, we're actually cringing, because it was 180 Australian dollars a day, which we eventually got down to 165. But we bought so much stuff, and it cost us a fortune to send all the stuff back, So, and then we were meeting up with other people on the road, and there was 3 of them traveling for $100 a day, and they've been on the road for 2 years, and that was a child and the mother and father, and we thought, this is crazy. That budget was so high. That's why this time we decided that we're going to sort of travel on the age pension, which is the Australian $92 a day, and we achieved it. We've had some great fun and great adventures and stayed on some really nice places.
So you basically halved your cost from what you did the first year when you went out, and it was an example of other people, which has obviously prompted you to do it. But have you had to sacrifice much to halve the cost? I think that's the big question. People are thinking, oh, well, I'm giving away half my lifestyle. But what were you wasting money on, and what's the key things that you can't?
Scarves.
I don't know. I mean, every person has a fetish, and I had a fetish for picking up scarves. And I was in Greece or Turkey or in Guatemala, and another scarf would jump around my neck. And I kind of, in the end, had to send back 20 kilos or whatever it was from Peru of scarves and things. So in the end, you just need one scarf, right? But it's also about...
Because we're on the road every 4 nights.
Yeah, possible.
And our cost structure for transport was just crazy. We did 4 months South America, 4 months Europe, and 4 months Asia. The accommodation side was cheap, but it was just being on the road continually. And of course, we sort of drink lots of beer and things as well, so which is our bud stuff.
Okay. I'm finding you guys a little hard to hear. Can you hear them clearly, Brendan? Is it just me?
I can hear them, yeah. It's a bit trippy, but I can hear them okay.
Okay. Yeah, we're not quite as clear as we were at the start, but that's okay. Yeah, that's right. I mean, I guess consumerism is the big cost for most people in their day-to-day lives, isn't it? That you're marketed to constantly. You're trained, I guess, to spend money constantly. And when you're on the road, those opportunities really don't come up to the same extent. Or, as you found out, if you want to go buying up, you've got a big job to ship stuff home. So that's one big cost to cut. What else is significant in terms of managing your costs on the road? What other things do people really need to be focusing on if they're wanting to achieve these sort of budgets?
You want to go with that, Brendan?
Yeah. Well, it's everything, honestly. I feel like you need to, for example, let's say we're talking about accommodation. People, they might feel like they need to, most people will go with a hotel first. That's the first thing they think, well, I need to book a hotel room. But like you say, consumerism forces us to buy things that are more expensive than we need. So, of course, you're always marketed to big hotels and expensive hotels. Who wants to sell a cheap hotel room? No one. They want you to spend as much money as possible. But if you look at the standard hotel room, it's full of excess. Like, especially for me, I don't need a double bed. I don't need my own bathroom. I don't need a fridge. So you're trying to get. I think it's about only spending as much money as you need to be comfortable. So I'm quite happy to sleep in a single bed in a dorm room, and I don't care if there's 18 or 20 beds in that dorm room. For someone else, they might not be comfortable with that, but they could sleep in a dorm room with 4 beds. So as long as you're only spending enough money that you need to be comfortable, you'll find that your costs when you're traveling will go way down, and it goes for everything. It goes for food, it goes for transport, flights, everything. And as long as you're not spending in excess, I think you're going to be fine.
I think that's a really good point, because I think that what we found initially when we were doing the purely on the accommodation at that 185, we put in our mind almost 50% of the budget to go into accommodation. And whilst we went to hostels, which was fantastic, because we always said, okay, we want to have a private room with a non-shared bathroom, so that puts your costs up by about 20%. That being said, it was much cheaper rather than going into a hotel. And the benefit of going into the hostel was that whilst we were in our own bedroom environment, the comfort of our own bathroom, we would then have the beauty of actually having the celebrations or the actual camaraderie with the other folks in the hostel. And that's where you got the real tips and tricks about how to travel, where to go, how to travel more slowly. And that was a rich learning from us. I think if we'd actually travelled via the Marriott, or if we've travelled into the Hiltons, or stayed at that sort of brand level, high hotel level, we would have experienced what we call a foyer level. It would be you register, you check in, but you don't really learn about travelling, and in particular, you may be guided by those enterprises to go on to the package, group travels, etc., which are much faster, and you're not really getting an opportunity to slow it down and then travel as a local, which is what we really enjoy.
Well, that's the great advantage of dorms, is you can compare notes with other people. And so obviously you guys did a bit of that in your first year, but now you've kind of moved away from that. Is that right?
Yeah, we're doing quite a lot of house sitting now as we're traveling around. And that really brings your costs down, because, for example, we were in Mexico in Tuxtlan, and we were spending $15 a day, and that was our 3 meals. And we could have got that down even more if we didn't buy the local beer. But, so it would probably come down to about $8 a day. But you're having that rich experience of living in a place in Mexico where there's not too many tourists. We were there for about 4 weeks house sitting. Cobbled stones, beautiful mountains, pyramids around. And it was just an incredible experience. But house sitting does bring down our costs. I think last 2015, we had about 186 days out of 300 days in our city.
Which is quite interesting, because out of that, we did some numbers actually for the financially minded. So we actually paid for 114 days out of that factor. And when we kind of looked at what the estimation of that if we hadn't, if we had a fully funded 300 days, it would have cost us an additional, at least $5,000 for those 300 days. Going to Brendan's point is, when you've got that strategy, if you can slow it down, if you can go into an area as a bit more like a local, etc., in this instance, absolutely doing the house sitting as a pillar, that contributes. So we did about 2/3 house sitting, and then 1/3 actually paying for days, which means that we could then actually upsize, kind of do a McDonald's upsize, where we went to one place where suddenly we were paying, the full value of our $92 a day, Australian, 67 US. We kind of went up to 80 or 90, and we then suddenly moved into a higher accommodation. Really enjoy that part of that as a living in a resort, and
it's a treat.
Yeah, and that was a treat. It's kind of and we were looking all the time with sort of an accountant's type head on, which is, okay, how do we amortise that cost? So we build buffer through the house sitting portfolio, and then we then say, okay, we might want to travel a little bit quicker for the next period of time. And we might actually want to treat ourselves and go into a resort style accommodation in Mexico, just for a few periods of time, and then travel back to the hostel world, back into other parts of South America. That's kind of how it worked out. Yeah.
Well, that's probably an important point to make. It's really about your average cost, isn't it? And not to freak out if the costs get a bit high here and there, if you've got the opportunity to lower your costs elsewhere. But I think that travelling slow is such an important point for people to grasp, because it sounds so counterintuitive. The idea of travelling longer must be more expensive. That's what everyone thinks. But when you do slow it down, it does open up new opportunities, as you say, house sitting. You get longer term if you go with Airbnb or something. You can get longer term accommodation, can't you? It's slower is actually far more effective. You find where the locals eat. You find where they hang out. You can talk to them and find out the cheaper places, the easiest and best ways to travel. And that's probably is that basically the crux of the whole thing, is the travelling slow? Would you say that's the number one factor that makes the biggest difference?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
I think Brendan made a very good point earlier. I might just hand that back to him to talk about that, because I learned something very important he just was communicating about that. Can you just talk to us a little bit more about that, Brendan?
Well, for me, I actually think traveling slow, you can still travel fast on a budget. I think it's the number one thing would be where you choose to go. And, you can go to, say, a place like Paris or Vegas, and everyone wants to go to these places, and you can still go to them. But if you're in the business of traveling long-term and keeping your budget down, you could spend like 3 weeks in Paris, or you could spend 3, 4, 5 months in Vietnam or Peru or something. And so I've always said that be flexible on where you want to go, and don't sort of be like, well, I have to go to Paris and I have to go to Vegas and I have to go to London, and forget about all these other places, because you'll find that you can have really fulfilling travel experiences in pretty much anywhere, as long as you're open-minded enough to enjoy the place and embrace it for what it is. So I've traveled almost exclusively to developing countries, and I do still go. I still went to Paris last year. I still went to London last year, but I spent about 3 nights in Paris. I spent 5 or 6 nights in London, and I stayed with a friend. And so when you go to the expensive places, you shorten your time, do everything you can to keep your costs down, and if you want to extend your travels, you can do that in the more affordable places. And I find that's what's really going to keep you on the road for a long time.
Yeah, I think you would say that exactly echo that, because, and that was for the learning from the first part of the journey, where we were moving every 4 to 4 days to these sectors, going across. Second time, slowing it down over 300 days. The house sitting gives us the option to live like a local, move more slowly, less pivot points. This time going forward, once again, if you've got 1 day to live, and kind of when you get moving more towards our age, it becomes much more important about being discerning about how you're going to use your time. And going to Brendan's point, which is, if we had to have 1 day to live, are we going to spend that in Paris, or are we kind of going to go across to Budapest? Well, you know what? We're going to go to Budapest, because we still think we're going to get a rich cultural experience, using this as an example, as we would by going to Paris. But we know we could probably spend 2 weeks around that area for the cost of almost 2 days in Paris, using the equivalent of our sort of style of living, which would be a hostel, non-shared private room, would be what we want to do. So definitely, we do cost of living indexes. We use Numio, which gives us the ability to be able to look at what does it cost to do the Mac burger. We're not going to eat McDonald's, but you kind of look at the cost of beers. You can do a cost of living index, and you can see how much it's going to cost you to travel to Paris, or how much it's going to cost you to travel to Romania. And then we'll say, right, let's put that into the agenda in terms of our travel planning. So with that being said, we're going to be in Europe. We're going to be house sitting, bringing the cost down. We'll then be moving to Cuba for my 60th, and then we're then going to use, prior to that, we're going to use a repositioning cruise to take us from Barcelona back to that part of the region to Florida, and then come down through that way. So then we're going to say, okay, 2017, 2018, we move further down into South America, Central America, Patagonia to bring the cost down. And of course, we pop back up in 2018, which will be around using the Eastern Europe as an area. So, when you look at a 3-year amortization of those costs, we've been smashed for these last periods of time that we're back in Australia. We'll be back here from the beginning of January to the end of May. Our costs have gone berserk. They're absolutely ridiculous costs. So we've got to kind of take that cost and spread that over the next 3 years for us to continue to be able to hit that goal of hitting the current age pension. And bless the government, what they've done here in Australia, they've given the Australian pensioners another stretch goal, which is they're actually starting to now limit the ability for the age pensioner to actually live outside of Australia for more than 6 weeks, and their age pension starts to get penalised. And it changes the value proposition in terms of travelling even more strategically for those that are planning in a transition to retirement, or when they get to the full age pension, they no longer will have the full time to be outside the country for more than 6 months. So it's a compelling time to travel now.
Is it 6 months or 6 weeks?
Well, they initially had six months, but it's just gone through the lower house, which is they plan to change that. So that if you're an age pension at 67, you used to go out of the country for more than 6 weeks. Guess what? You're going to lose percentages of your entitlement. Whereas before, you could be out for 6 months and have no change. So the whole proposition is changing. So, the gift of time, you've got to kind of look at what your options are in terms of where you're going to travel. And low-cost countries are definitely the place to travel.
Yeah. Well, you're right about Australia. I mean, we're obviously based here as well. It is very expensive to be here. And you're the one who famously said during your interview, and I've remembered it and quoted it to many people, that it costs you more to sit at home on your couch in Sydney than it did to travel. And it's so true. And I think for most Western countries, that's the case. And yet there are alternatives out there. And, Brendan's touched on the fact that location is important where you go. There's so many countries out there that offer so many options. And they're not third world backwaters. And again, this is where people probably don't necessarily realise what's available. You can go to places like Colombia, which has had a terrible reputation in the past and is now one of the most popular tourist destinations. You can get great healthcare in these places too. I don't know whether you guys have had reason to use the healthcare in any of these countries, but I've spoken to some in the past who have, and places like Malaysia, Thailand, Colombia, the healthcare is better than you'll find in the US and Australia. So, this sort of thing is quite common. But you made a good point there, Duncan, about living like a local, and that's what it's about. If you go to these places and you do live like a local, you are experiencing the true country and your costs drop substantially. So I just want to talk a bit about saving up to travel. We've talked about minimising costs on the road, but for people looking to get started, obviously having a little bit of a buffer of funds to get underway is important. What's the secret to saving up? Because I know a lot of people, have enough trouble saving money for their general lifestyle, never mind with the goal of trying to travel. But maybe, Brendan, I'll chuck this one across to you for a start, because I know as an accountant and you worked through this situation yourself, paying off debt, you had to save up money to travel as well as pay off your debt. What's the secret to creating a travel fund to get going?
Well, saving's a huge topic, which I've talked about a lot. I think the main thing is we overcomplicate it a lot. People's relationship with money. I mean, saving money is just not spending as much money as you earn. Like if you earn $2,000 a month and you spend $1,800, you've saved $200. And people, when you look at it that simply, you're like, yeah, that's true, but how do you do it? But that's really what it is. It's learning to spend less money each month. And I think the most important thing is to set your own goals, because people often look at me. In my free ebook on my site, I've written basically every number, like how much I saved each month, each year. And people say like, oh, well, Brendan, I don't earn as much money as that, so I could never save enough money to go traveling. And that's the complete wrong mindset to be in, I think, because there's always going to be someone that's earning more and saving more than you. It doesn't mean that you're not going to be able to achieve the same things. Like a blogger that I'm friendly with, his name's Earl. Have you heard of Wandering Earl?
Yeah.
So he was one of the first travel bloggers I ever started reading, and he talked about saving money. And he saved money while he was traveling. So he was working on a cruise ship. He was earning around $4,000 a month, and over 6 months he saved $24,000. And all his expenses are paid for, obviously, on the ship. The room is free and the restaurants are free. And so it would have been so easy to just look at him and be like, well, he got a good job on a cruise ship and saved money while he was traveling. I could never do that, so I give up. I saved my money in an office, in a cubicle for 3.5 years. He did it in 6 months and saved almost as much as me. And so people are going to look at me and be like, well, I can never do that. But if you can only save, maybe you could only save $2,000 or $3,000 a year, and at the end of the year you can go traveling for 3 months or 3 weeks or 4 weeks. I mean, isn't that still a worthwhile thing to do? Isn't that still going to be a great experience for you? So people, I feel like the first thing you need to do is set your own personal goals instead of looking at, well, Brendan went traveling for 2 years and I'm not going to be able to do that, so I can't do this. I mean, if you can just travel for 1 month per year or 2 months per year or 1 month per 2 years, it's still going to be a great experience for you, and it's still going to be worthwhile for you. So that's the first thing, is to be in the right mindset of saving what you can save, rather than just trying to, have this grand adventure that is comparable to everyone else's. So that would be the first piece of advice that I usually give to people. If you want to get into something that's more practical, I would say it's about setting small goals and giving yourself small rewards. So you look at a goal like $10,000 and you're like, whoa, that's impossible. How am I ever going to save $10,000? But if you split it up into 10 goals of $1,000 or 20 goals of $500, it becomes a lot easier. Like, I'm going to save $1,000 in the next 2 months. And you can do it, and you're one step closer. Instead of, having this overwhelming thing. Because people give up. Saving is like dieting almost. Like, people give up so early because they kind of save $500 and they spend it and they're like, I'm not even close, and they give up. It's exactly the same thing. So if you set small goals, set small rewards for yourself, I feel like you're going to get there eventually, which is the goal, really, to get there eventually. It doesn't matter if it took me 2 years, it doesn't matter if it takes you 5 years, you still get to take your trip. It's still worth it, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
I like the way you said about simplifying it, and you're quite right. At the end of the day, if you're making $2,000 a month and you can save 200 of it, that's what you got to do. Just spend 1,800, and it's a simple process. But I think we do complicate it in our own minds, and a lot of it comes back to that consumerism and I guess making choices. Do you want the scarves as Duncan had in that case? I mean, it's the same whether you're on the road or at home. Do you want to buy the scarves, or do you want the trip? And it's making the choice. But I think half of it is recognising that the travel is more affordable than you think and that you don't need as much money to do it. And then the second half is really disciplining yourself to go ahead and do it. What do you guys, do you want to add something to that, Duncan and Jane?
I think that just picking up on Brendan's point, I love it when he talks about reward. And I think that what we kind of do is we were living in a large house and working two jobs and time poor. And when you're in that situation, you kind of just you buy expensively and you kind of have need. And a simple factor by actually downsizing our accommodation and then moving to rental accommodation meant that we had to review what it was that we owned and what we actually needed moving forward. And so we did some strategies and looked at absolutely every single line item in our budget, from household insurances to fuel costs. And we were buying the fuel, based on the Australian product, where you get the Woolworths or the Coles, and they give you a voucher. You think you're saving money because they're getting you 6 cents off, but you don't realise the actual fact that you're paying more at the pump because you're not an independent. So looking at every single line item, and good old price code, 80% of the cost is 80, 20% of the components would be 80%. We took out over 30 to 40% of our cost structure just by looking and analysing, renegotiating insurances, downsizing some of the cars, all those things, which then got us that original ability to track to that expenditure. And then, then we then realised, we've still got too much fat. I mean, an example of that, we travelled across on a 100-litre travel bag, and the second time we went out with a 65, and this time we're going to go out with a 40-litre trolley bag. So you kind of get over a period of time, which is less actually does give you more. It's about rewarding yourself. It's about the ability to be able to define what it is that you need to do. And we capture every single cost, literally. So that scarf, we know exactly how much it is. We know how much the beers cost, how much the packet of crisps cost, how much the avocado costs. We know that, and therefore we can be very discerning and look at the structure of the cost, and we analyse it, and we say, okay, for example, we got back to Australia. Guess what? An avocado jumped into the basket. It was afterwards. I said, Jen, do you know how much that cost? It was $3.30 for an avocado. Guess what? Avocado is now not on our budget while we're here, because we buy in Mexico free for 90 cents. So it's about, do you really need that avocado? No, you don't. You can find another product, something else that's nourishing and whatever. Otherwise, it's small things like that that just get swept away. Do you actually need that other cappuccino? If we went out today, it would have cost us $10 to have 2 cappuccinos before this flag. If we do that every single day, that's $70 in a week. That's 1 day's of our budget, accommodation. No, we're not going to do that. Literally, we've gone to the supermarkets, gone to Aldi, bought their local coffee, and we enjoy it. And that's what you've got to look at every single item and question yourself, do you really want to do that? But you know what, at the end of the day, you only do this if you have a passion for travelling. If you don't want to travel, whether it's 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 3 months, 10 years, then you're not going to have the motivation or the innovation inside yourself to be able to do exactly what Brendan talked about before, which is yourselves some dreams and reward yourselves.
That's a good point you make. About choosing the trade-off. I know we interviewed somebody a while ago, and she said if I was looking at a leather jacket in the store and it's $400, before I picked it up, she'd go, "That's an airfare return to Bangkok. Which would I rather have?" And she said, "I'll put the coat straight down." And that was a little reminder that she needed. And as you said, when you add up all those coffees and that during a week, that's a bit of accommodation at the end of the day that you can have, and it's just about what your passion is and what you're prepared to trade off. And that amazed me when you said cutting 30 to 40% off your costs. That's a huge reduction. I guess it's the old 80-20 rule, isn't it? If you look at your bills, 20% of your actual bills are probably 80% of your costs. And do you need those things? And I think probably food and dining out and drinking is probably the big killer, isn't it?
Yes, massive. That's absolutely huge. And right now, this day, we've got a conversation back here in Australia. We're helping folks who are travel planning services about how they actually live out of the cubicle, how do they change styles, how do they get motivation. And the first thing I do is to say, how do you declutter life? How do you downsize? How do you give more time to yourself? And that's about getting into their budget. And Bren will appreciate that as well, being an accountant, is you've got to know the facts. You need to know. If you don't know today where you're spending your money, you need to sit down today and you need to define it. Then look at it, and we can guarantee you that we can take monies out of your budgets and save monies. Then what you do is, using Brendan's analogy again, you put it into a reward bucket. That can be your travel reward, and it could be $200, it could be $2,000, it could be $20,000 over a period of time. That's irrelevant. As long as you've got a motivation and an insight to know where it is that you're spending your current consumer package to spend it.
That's so important to know exactly where the money goes, and I advise people to always try and stick with plastic, because then it's recorded.
Perfect.
And then once you get your statement, if you go through it and you look at everything that you've bought, and if you can honestly ask yourself, which one of these things that I need, and maybe highlight that pink, and the things that you really did need and highlight them yellow, and your whole bank statement will probably be pink, because you would have bought Coke and coffee and all sorts of stuff. And people always say that, I'm trying to save money, but it just, I don't know what's happening. I lose it all and it just disappears. But if you're recording everything, which is, a very accountant thing to do, but you're gonna realize that just one small change, like I used to have people at office that would buy coffee and a muffin every day, and they walk into the office with their thing, and that's $5. And if you do that every day over a year, that's, I don't know, what's that, like maybe $1,700, $1,800?
When you buy coffee and muffins, I can't get them for $5 anymore.
Yeah. And the beauty of that also, Brendan, is that if they're putting everything on credit card and it's linked to a frequent flyer program, they're building up their points for free travel.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And
so, I guess the important point there too is also to make sure you pay the credit card off, because that's only going to compound your problems further down the track, isn't it? But you're right, it's measurable then. I think that's a very good point, that if you do have it on the plastic, you are measuring it. And it's great then to look back, because most people lose complete track of what they do during a month, and they never look at their statement, and they don't know really where it's going. And if you don't measure it, you can't manage it at the end of the day. Do you guys use anything on the road? I know there's a one called Trail Wallet out there, an app that helps you with traveling. Have you guys used that at all? Or
we started off using Trail Wallet, and then I went to just an Excel spreadsheet. So what we're doing now, we're back in Sydney, I'm actually running a spreadsheet with our daily expenditure, and I'm putting it onto Trail Wallet as well. So I'm trailing it again. With the view of when we hit Europe, it's going to be a lot easier with the currency conversions, etc. to track.
Yeah, it's certainly a lot more stable product now. When we first used it about 3 years ago, it's now one of the leading products. Yeah. Never Ending Voyage bloggers have actually created it, and a whole host of other bloggers who we have. By the way, we have sort of Friday, our equivalent to collab on Skype, whereby a number of us get together and we have a Friday cocktail.
Virtual happy hour.
Around the world, and look at that discussion, we're kind of going, hey, how's the cost going currently in Ecuador or wherever it is, and then instantly they will say, here it is, and actually it was Des's haircut that actually pushes over budget $2. And we said, what are you using? And they were using Trail Wallet, and then there's some other guys flagging it who are currently in Croatia, they're on Trail Wallet. So we know that it's working, we know it's stable, and we're very much hoping that we'll be able to move to that platform as opposed to keep on, the current spreadsheets. That being said, we've got, we've always run our budget in a spreadsheet, and we'll probably continue to do so with pivot reports and presentations. So it's not hard just to get the one too.
Okay. The trouble with virtual happy hours is if you say I'm paying, 80 cents for my beer and somebody else is paying $4, it ends the conversation pretty quickly, doesn't it? It's a bit sobering.
Well, a case of 24 in Nicaragua was 13 US. And the case here is 40, right? And you can't do the maths in that. So that's why May is becoming very compelling to hit the road again.
Yeah, I can see why. Guys, probably getting near the point of winding this up. Any last thoughts or anything that you really want to share? As I say, I think we've covered some good ground for people here today in terms of it. Obviously, some good points. We'll make sure we put those into the show notes. But the process of saving up, actually talking about saving up, I was watching a Periscope yesterday of a guy, Stephen Courtney, who we also interviewed. And he had saved up, I think, $15,000 to go travelling, and he's been on the road for 4 years, and he still has his original $15,000. He's been able to make money on the road. But I know a lot of people say that you should save as that buffer, and we've been hearing that more and more from people as they go along. So it's important to have that behind you. But the process, I think, what you guys have discussed today is excellent. You've shared some fantastic tips. Any last things you want to mention? But I think probably important to probably tell people a little bit about your website and how to get some more information. I'll start with you, Brendan, because you've got your book, Triple Your Travels, which I think your first chapter in that actually talks about saving up to go on the road. If people want to get that, go to your website. Is that the best place?
Yeah, go to my website. It'll be on the menu under book, I think, books, something like that. Yeah, and I write, I've been blogging for almost 2 years now. I like to write, long form stories, very long form guides. I don't post that often, maybe once a week, once every 2 weeks. I always try to make sure it's something helpful or interesting, so I'd love it if you came and had a read. If you're interested in the book, that's also there. And I also have a free ebook that talks a lot about, that focuses a lot about taking the initial leap from non-traveler to traveler. So things you need to change in your mindset, saving, selling all your stuff that you don't need, things like that. So it's kind of like grooming yourself to be in the best position possible before you start life on the road. So that's there, and that's free as well if anyone's interested in that.
That's on your website. BrenOnTheRoad.com is the place to go for that. I've read the Triple the Travel book. It's an excellent book, well worth having a look at if you're looking for something in this area. And also, if you haven't downloaded the first issue for free of the Expat Chat magazine, Brendan's got an article in there with 7 tips on saving up to hit the road. So go to our website, theexpatchat.com. You can download that first issue for free from there and have a read of that article, which will get you up and running as well. Duncan and Jane, do you want to just mention, because I know you guys do a little bit of consulting with people to help them to hit the road. Do you want to just fill us in some details on that and where they can get hold of you with your website?
Yeah, our website is www.totravel2. And if you sign up for our newsletter, we include a free ebook. And that ebook is all about our first lot of accommodation we stayed in back in 2013. So there's over 70 accommodations with actual honest reviews of what we thought about the place.
Actual honest reviews, that's good.
and some also, that some of the accommodation has offered a discount as well, if you mentioned to travel too. But we also have a travel planning service, so if you just find everything out there on the internet too confusing and you just don't know where to start, or give us a call. We can help you out on that.
Yeah,
cool.
Go to the travel planning section on the page and make contact, and there's some a la carte services on there, or you can actually just specifically specify kind of what you'd like to discuss or explore, and we can take it from there.
Yep.
Good stuff. So that's ToTravel2. That's TO Travel and TOO. So totravel2.com. And if you are a subscriber to our magazine, these guys are going to appear in issue 3 with a full breakdown of costings of how they've hit the road. And I'm really looking forward to seeing that. In fact, I think we have the draft of issue 3. I have to check with Leanne through at the moment. So it's due to come out shortly. So great little article in there about how to minimise your costs while on the road and how to budget. So well worth checking out. Guys, thank you to you both. It's been a pleasure having you along today. We managed to get through the little technical hitches at the start, which is always part and parcel of Blab at the moment, but it's a good platform. It's obviously still going through some beta phase at the moment and a bit of testing, but it's been great to speak with you both, and we'll make sure we follow your journeys from here.
Lovely.
Great,
Thanks, guys. Thank you. That's it, guys.
Bye, Brendan.
Bye.
See you later.
Ciao.
Bye, Tony.